Hello everyone and welcome back to another live hangout here at Voice Essentials. I hope you're having a great weekend or the end of your weekend as the case may be. I hope you are safe and healthy and doing really well. And I hope you're in good voice. I'm feeling like I'm in good voice, so there you go. Today we are going to do a Q&A, but before we do a Q&A, we're going to do one of our new mini topics. And I'm wanting to deep dive in a mini way into the topic of how do I sing with more heart. I've been asked this question many times by my private singing students, and so I want to kind of unpack it today. I want to give us, I've got 7 points that I want to go through for us to think about, and I've got examples of singers who I think are good people to go and have a look at after today's live show. So anyway, we'll get into that in a moment. Before we get going, I do want to just do a quick thank you to everyone who was involved in last week's live show. And I'm particularly talking about those of you who were in the live chat, because last week's show was quite a sensitive topic, was it not? It was rather sensitive. We're talking about well, the term that I still am struggling to use, we were talking about fat singers. And if you didn't watch last week's show, you might take offense at the use of that term. That was the term we are being instructed to use when talking about people who we historically may have referred to as being overweight or being obese, being larger. Anyway, if you're going, what is he talking about, then can I really encourage you to go and watch last week's live show, after today's live show, of course, because it was, whilst it was a very sensitive topic to navigate through, and I think we navigated it quite well with the help of Dr. Elizabeth Benson, it was incredibly informative. It was challenging. I continue to be challenged by that topic, but it was tremendously informative, and I want to encourage you to go and watch it if you haven't. But for those of you who are in the live chat, I just want to say thank you for the way you conducted yourselves as a community in the live chat. Linda said, who moderates our live chat. Hi, Linda, who's moderating right now, said that the discussion was rather respectful and sensitive. And so thank you for that. Next week, we're going to have another live guest. And that live guest will be Dr. Heidi Moss Erickson. Fascinating lady. We are going to be talking, she first and foremost, my understanding is that she was a biologist, a scientist. We're getting her on the show next week to talk about neuroscience, the effect of neuroscience and the implications for the new things we're finding about the brain and the way it works. And it is going to be a fascinating discussion. In fact, I think it'll be less discussion and more instruction from Dr. Heidi, because she is highly regarded internationally, mostly for her capacity to communicate the biology of us as singers. And I'm really looking forward to next week's discussion. It is going to be tremendous. Of course, the way to find out about next week's show, to be reminded, is to be subscribed, hit the white bell icon, and that way you'll get the notification, and that will be cool. That is going to be super, super interesting. Start throwing your questions into the live chat straight away, because that way you're going to be able to make sure that your question's ready to be answered after our mini topic today. As I said, is going to be about how to sing with more heart. And we are going to do that. Let me just get this up right after this.
Sound check. Check 1, check 2.
Okay, so how to sing with more heart. As I said, this is a topic that that I have been asked about a lot. You know, we all want to emote, don't we? We all want to communicate. We talk about communication so much here on the channel. But how do you do that? Like, what are some key attributes that you can go looking for in your singing, that you can go looking to develop? Because this is a skill. This is something that you have to practice. You've got to work on. And so getting into this whole idea of how to sing with more heart is, first and foremost, you've got to connect with the song's emotions and message. That seems kind of duh. But so many singers, when I ask them, you know, what is the lyric about that you're singing about? We'll be working on a song in the studio or online. And I'll say, well, so tell me, what's the story? You know, what are the lyrics saying? And it's not uncommon for a blank stare to suddenly come over said singer and go, yeah, actually, what are the lyrics? The only way you can emote anything is to know what you're singing and connect the emotional status of those lyrics into what you're singing. Because the song story and the message, you want to be able to connect with that on some personal level. We want to be able to have a sense where we can, you know, make a personal contact with that lyric. Now, if you're a professional singer, this becomes a little bit more challenging because you're often being asked to sing songs that you may not have any personal connection with. But nonetheless, that's still your responsibility. But as avocational singers, we have that great, I guess, benefit of being able to choose songs that we do feel we connect with. And so make sure you do that. A great example of this is Adele. She is known for making a connection with her lyric, and in doing so, creating highly emotive performances and allowing her voice to really communicate that emotion. And a couple of songs that you might want to check out is Someone Like You and Hello. They're a good example of that real, you know, at every point, you know, she's really giving communication opportunity to the lyric she's singing. So the next point, practice vocal techniques that emphasize emotion. You would think that's another duh point, right? So how do you do that? Well, you do that by utilizing dynamics to create intensity. You've got to think about loud and soft. Loud and soft in singing is a bit like light and shade in the visual art form. And when you create light and shade, you create contrast, you create depth. And using dynamics to create that sense of shift is really beneficial in your storytelling. And as you know, we create intensity when we build, but we don't only create intensity when we build, we also create intensity when we pull back. And we create not only intensity when we draw volume back and dynamic, but we also create intimacy. And that's a really important point. Experiment with different vocal tones and textures to express emotions. You're going to get a very different vocal emotion when you've got a clean, clear tone compared to when you've got a breathy tone, compared to if you've got a rasp in your voice. And so think about experimenting with different vocal tones and the colors of your voice. And then use vocal embellishments to emphasize your key phrases or words. So vocal embellishments can be melisma, yeah, little riffs and runs. It can be vibrato. It's all about making the right choice at the right time to employ them for the most bang for your buck, all right? Whitney Houston is a great example of a person that uses dynamic range. She also is fabulous in her use of the employment of riff and run. You know, there are singers, I think, who overuse riffs and runs, and it is its own art form, so I want to acknowledge that. But when you listen to Whitney, you never get a sense that it's overused. It's always just right, just the right amount. She also uses things like vibrato and those sorts of things. I Will Always Love You is a great example of these things that we're talking about. Go and check that out after the show, and remind yourself of just what it takes to convey these sorts of things. Okay, the third point is to develop a strong connection with your audience. Well, that's what this is all about, right? It's all about developing a connection with your audience. We do that through eye contact. You've heard it said many times, the eyes are the windows to the soul. But it's only when you actually make eye contact, when you are actually able to really zone in on another human being. And we have to be careful with this tool because it can get to a point where it's a little awkward, right? And you don't want to spend the entire show looking right down the barrel at one audience member. That's just going to feel a little bit odd, a little bit creepy in certain circumstances. But you do want to actually connect. You know, if I spent the entire show today just looking around and not really, looking at the camera, you're over there, but I'm just sort of in this space here in Brisbane, Australia, all by myself, and there would be no sense of connection. But the way we build connection online is for me to be able to look you in the eye, straight down the barrel of the camera, so that we have a sense of connection. And we do the same when we perform. And so that's really important. And of course, we also do it through facial expressions. You know, when I'm working with a singer and I'll say, what are you feeling? And they'll express what they're feeling. I said, well, then tell me on your face. Let me know. It's one thing for a singer to experience it internally, but if there is no physical expression given to that, then me as an audience member, I'm completely, completely in the blank. Sorry, I thought I had an audio issue there for a second. In fact, as we keep going, let me just come over here and double check that everything's going well. Yes, it is. I always like to check in with Linda at the beginning of a show. So you've got to make sure that this visual, this facial connection is going on to convey the emotions. And then you've got to engage your audience through storytelling or personal anecdotes related to the song. This is a real craft. And the only way to really practice this and to learn when is the right time to do this, when is not the right time to do this, is to be doing it. I often say to my students, there is so much we can learn to do here in the teaching studio. It's a great place for us to do so many different things. But to really learn performance, you have to perform. You actually have to get up there and just do it, and try to do it a lot, because that's how we really grease the wheels. That's how we really get we develop these performance skills. And this is kind of speaking to that point of patter, right? And allowing patter, the stuff that gets said between songs. I often think of it like the mortar between bricks. The brick is what the wall is made out of, but without the mortar, the bricks aren't really that locked together. And so our patter, what we talk about and say between songs, is like the mortar. It's really important of its own. You don't want it to be the whole wall because that won't have any structural integrity either. But you do want to be really well versed in how you create that connection in your patter, using anecdotes and little stories to really connect. Someone who is reportedly, I've never seen him live, but someone who apparently is very, very good at this is Bruce Springsteen. And you might go, Bruce Springsteen? He's really known for creating what, in my research, someone described as being almost a communal experience in live performances. And so that's you might want to go and check that out and have a look at that online, see what you find. You also need to use visualization and mental imagery. If you can't see it, if you can't experience it, your audience has got Buckleys of being able to see it and feel it, experience whatever it is that you're trying to emote. Oh, there we go. Picture the emotions, the scenes, or the characters described in the song. I like to create visual orientation. Now, one of the key things that I find really beneficial in my ability to create imageries within my own head, the eye of my mind, is I read a lot of fiction. I read it before I go to bed every night, very like clockwork. It's a part of my sleep ritual. And but what I love about reading novels, and I read a lot of fiction and a lot of at the moment I'm reading the Last Kingdom series. So good. And I love being caused to create the movie in my own mind. And we have to do that as singers. We've got to be able to first of all create it inside our own head, because from that is what we're going to be able to express what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and what we're experiencing in the process of that picture. You also want to imagine yourself you can try imagining yourself as the protagonist or the narrator of the song story. Telling, and this is going to come down to the song, right? You want to feel. Am I the person that's actually first person delivering this piece of information, or am I telling a story about someone else? And this is good storytelling, because that's what you are as a singer, right? You're either the first person communicator, you're the person that is delivering the felt experience first person, or you're the narrator, you're the person telling a story about, you're the bard telling and communicating the story about, these characters within your mind's eye. The next point, practice mindfulness and emotional awareness. I practice mindfulness, and in fact, I did a mindfulness session this morning, and it's just an opportunity for you to connect with yourself. I think if you're looking because I do have singers say to me, but I don't feel like I'm well connected to my own sense of self emotionally, and that's okay. We all have to develop and mature in these areas. And so one way we can do that is, first and foremost, to be still, to just sit and shut out all of the noise of life and take a moment to just be. It can be surprising what emerges when you do that. And the practice of mindfulness is about being able to connect and recognize certain emotional states. And the other thing it will show you is just how busy your mind can be. And so that's a part of practicing mindfulness as well. but it's also being aware of that emotional status, because it's going to be very hard for you to communicate through a song emotionally if you're not really able to identify how do I feel. Am I angry? Am I upset? Am I happy? Am I joyful? Am I reflective? What is my emotional state? And so you want to take time to reflect on your emotions and your experiences. What has been your what is your reflection on that experience? What are you, when you have an experience, how do you feel about that experience? Because if you can reflect on that sensation, then you can almost add that into your kit bag, those number of things that you can express with. Practice mindfulness techniques, breathing, we talked about that. And you get to really, it's surprising. I only started doing mindfulness about 3 years ago. I've been doing it for a little while. I am very much a student of mindfulness. I'm by no means a teacher of it. But it is surprising how over the time that I've been practicing mindfulness, how I think have become a little bit more aware of my emotional center, just a little bit more aware of how I feel at any given moment, and being able to be a little bit more nuanced in expressing how I feel. And I wonder whether for guys this is perhaps more challenging to develop than for girls. I don't know, but certainly that's been my experience. What have we got next? We want to choose songs that resonate with you personally. Oh, I need to come back to the mindfulness one because, I didn't give you an example of someone who does a visualization and mental imagery. Bob Dylan, check him out for visualization and storytelling. Like, I think you'd agree, he's quite well known for that. And for mindfulness, and for kind of really being aware of your emotional center, Joni Mitchell. Talk about someone, I think we all know that scene from Love Actually where Emma Thompson is crying in the bedroom. One of the most powerful crying scenes. And if I'm not mistaken, it's Joni Mitchell that she is playing. You want to look at songs like Both Sides Now, Blue. Wow. And I don't know. I mean, Emma Thompson's performance in that movie is amazing. Big fan of Emma Thompson. But I don't know how powerful it would have been without the Joni Mitchell's soundtrack. I'm pretty sure it's Joni Mitchell. Tell me in the chat. Am I right? I'm pretty sure that's Joni Mitchell. Right, let's get on to choose songs that resonate with you personally. And we do have the privilege as avocational singers to do that, right? We can choose songs that we really feel like we connect with. And so I'm sure you've got songs that you have a real sense of emotional connection to. Songs that have happened at major times in your life, significant events. And so think about those songs as songs that you can start working on to develop this skill of emotional connection. And then you're able to relay the significance of those moments for you. Linda's saying someone should go Google that, whether Dr. Dan's right about the Joni Mitchell. I'm pretty sure it was Joni Mitchell. I went to say I'll eat my hat. If it is, I'm not going to be eating my hat. Okay, what else have we got here? I'm sure we've got one more. Experiment with different genres and styles to find songs that best showcase your emotional range. And this is important, right? I would encourage you to start off with songs that are really specific to the, your wheelhouse, stuff that you love singing. But then venture, go looking to explore genres that are not your wheelhouse, that do require different emotions. And so if you're looking for something that's a little bit harder, let's say you generally sing candy pop, stuff that's really light, it's quite joyous. Maybe look at some rock, some songs that might have a little bit of a harder edge to them, that are expressing a slightly darker emotion. Play with it. It may not be something that you want to ultimately perform, but it will give you the opportunity to explore. And someone that does this really well was Johnny Cash, and he was kind of known for taking other people's songs and reimagining them out of his own storytelling experience. He did this song, he did the 9 Inch Nails, Hurt, and some people actually much more prefer the Johnny Cash version. But it's a real poignant example of what we're talking about here, in being able to choose a song. And Johnny Cash is known to have said, no, I love this song, it spoke to me, and this is how I'm going to perform my version of it. One more. We want to embrace vulnerability and authenticity. And this is a great point to finish on, because, finish our mini chat, that is. We'll get to your Q&As in a moment. Because authenticity is what it's all about. But you can only be truly authentic if you are willing to be vulnerable. And I have said to many students over the years that the picture of a great performance is when the singer opens up and says, look inside, look at me, in the sense of, look at this emotion that I am experiencing. And when we do that with a sense of vulnerability, and we do have to be careful in what we expose to the world as far as our emotional status. But if you're able to do this in a safe way, then when you are able to be vulnerable, it's surprising, and you're able to do it in a authentic way, your audience is more than likely to respond with, oh, me too. I've experienced that. I know what you're, and that's where you get the connection. And suddenly your audience is right there with you and going, yes, that's me. And we have this community that develops around, and it might be only a momentary communal experience. And someone, a relatively new singer on the scene, when I say relatively new, she's very new when we compare her to Bob Dylan, is Billie Eilish. And there's this deep sense of raw and genuine authenticity in her material, that she uses vocal effects expertly, and a very clever use of her voice to convey that vulnerable and authentic expression. She does that in songs like When the Party's Over and Everything I Wanted, and you can go and check those out in your own time. And did anyone go and have a look for I am correct. There you go. It was Joni Mitchell in the song. What have I got? I've got a couple more points over here, haven't I? So you need to allow yourself to be vulnerable and open when expressing your emotions through singing. And you need to aim for your authenticity in your performance rather than trying to imitate other artists' style or sound. So important. Don't be another Billie Eilish. Don't be another Adele or a Whitney, or, be you. There's only one you. We want just you. That's all you can be. So we want you to be the healthiest version of you, the most mature version of you, but we want you to be you. And you are the only person that can tell your story authentically. Certainly someone else can come along and tell your story, but it will only ever be a retelling of your story. It won't be actually their story because it's your story. We need you to communicate you. And these are skills. These are things that we do need to communicate. Let me come back over here. We do need to communicate these things with a lot of practice. This takes practice. It's not easy. It is something that you will have to work on. And there are risks involved in being vulnerable, in being authentic. But I have found, for the most part, that when I've taken those risks in performance, that they are highly rewarding experiences, and they are moments that form memory. Moments that not only for myself but for my audience members have formed a moment. And that's what we all go. That's what audiences want. That's actually what they want. And so hopefully you can look back over those things that we've talked about today, and really think about, well, how am I now going to go away and practice those things in my performances? Talking of stuff, what have we got here? We've got this is a good question. Actually, let's get to our live questions right after this. Funny thing is, I thought I was going to have enough time to pull up the right question and be really smart, but I didn't have time. Where am I going? I'm going to look for this question from Matthew. So let's go over here. So this is a question from Matthew. What is a riff and run? Sorry, it's a silly question. It's not a silly question at all, Matthew. And do you know what? Welcome to Voice Essentials. There is nothing wrong with asking silly questions here. That's what we're all about. Because, for every silly question that gets asked, and again, I don't think it's a silly question, but there are umpteen other people thinking exactly the same question, going, oh, should I ask that? A riff and run is, the classical term for riffs and runs was melisma, and that is where you've got a lot of hey, a lot of different runs where the melody could have easily been hey, and it could have just been a few notes, and suddenly we're punching 4 or 5 notes, moving those notes into a space where there should have only been 3, and we've suddenly got 12. In classical terms, we saw a lot of melisma at the height of the Baroque period. The melisma in contemporary singing, we often just refer to as riffs and runs. You hear it a lot in R&B, like pop R&B, so you're going to hear singers like Rihanna and Whitney and Mariah and Deborah Morgan, and there are so many others who we could name as singers who really use them a lot. And it's a real skill. It takes a lot of practice. It's something that if you're right into it, there are whole communities online that love their riffs and runs, and so you could check that out. Matthew, that's what a riff and run is. I hope that explanation was helpful. Where are we going? So let's. There was a question that got asked last week, I think it was, during our live show, and that was, how can we feel our head voice? And it's an interesting question because head voice, depending on the weight of the head voice. So head voice, we would typically refer to in modern speak as mode 2, or I often refer to it as lengthener dominant voicing. Where the terminology head voice comes from is it's a couple of hundred years old, and it's because the sensation of head voice was often associated with what you feel in your head, and it's all up here, right? Whereas if I'm down, it's all down in my chest, so chest voice and head voice. And so you've got this difference in physical sensation. I don't know how important it is for you to feel it outside of your sense of placement. Placement is probably, and look there, placement is a fraught term in the world of vocal pedagogy. There are some people who get themselves all tied up in knots over the use of the term placement. I find it helpful, okay? Just putting it out there. When explained that it is a metaphorical term, the voice does not place anywhere, but it is helpful to have a word to describe that sensory awareness of where a voice is sitting as you sing along through a melody. And so that's possibly a better way to approach sensory awareness, particularly in head voice, because it gives you a better line of thought and connection. But I don't want to be prescriptive with that, because we do all experience on a kinesthetic level. We all experience our voice differently, and so perhaps you're a person that would find that you're getting good sensory awareness throughout your skull in head voice. But that came from Anjali Singh, I think, from last week. We've got another question here from Melvin. Melvin always asks good questions. Melvin, here, let's ask your question here. So Melvin's asking, why is it easier to sing a song that is mostly head voice than one that moves between head and chest? Oh, great question. Even when I am within my vocal range, it's because you are having to move gears. I don't do a lot of cycling now, but as a kid I did a lot of cycling, and I had a 10-speed bike. That is, it had 2 gears at the front, 2 cogs at the front, and 5 at the back. Because remembering this was back in the 80s, and because I know you can get bikes that have like 24 gears now or whatever. I had 10. That's right. Back in the 80s, we only had 10 gears. And when I would change, if I didn't have the gearing set right, if I changed gears at certain speeds, the chain had come off, or the chain wouldn't quite make the gear change. And I've often thought that's kind of a helpful way. I hope this is helpful for you too, Melvin. It's a helpful way to think about your movement between your two, your mode 1 and mode 2, your chest voice and head voice voicings, because when you stay all in head voice, your upper register, the voice doesn't have to move gears. It just stays in that single gear. It's not moving. It just stays in that, and away you go. But the moment it has to come down into a mode 1 or a thyroarytenoid dominant activity, the musculature balance, the coordination, the movement between those 2 muscle groups, the thyroarytenoid muscle, which is your mode 1, and your cricothyroid musculature, which is mode 2, The moment there is a shift in the coordination, the balance between those two musculatures, suddenly we've got a coordination issue. And that's where balancing that gear change and getting that gear change really smooth is quite difficult. It's not an easy thing to learn to do. One of the things that you'll really benefit from is practicing, moving across that. Our female audience members will know all about this because that registered shift for most women sits right in the middle of your voice. For guys, it's sort of towards the top end of your vocal, you sort of comfortable singable range, and so we don't have to cross it anywhere near as much as our female friends, and so there is a challenge there, right? More so for the girls than for the guys. Regardless, we can really workshop it, and so many singers are nervous about playing in that space, workshopping the voice in that space, because it can be really clunky in its coordination. But the way to really develop a smoothness in that transition is to actually just get in there and workshop the voice and play in it and develop that sound, that movement. There are so many exercises in Voice Essentials 1, Voice Essentials 2, and Voice Essentials 3 that you'll find will be helpful, Melvin, in causing you to move across those. And we actually actively start doing that even in the middle of Voice Essentials 1 with exercises 9, 10, and 11. And so that's hopefully going to be advantageous to you. How are we going for time? We're only going to get, I think, one more question done. Can I tell you that? Because we're running out of time. So we're going to give the last question to Neelima. What a pretty name. I hope I'm saying that correctly. What's the ideal time for vocal practice and how to take care of hoarse voices due to over-practice? Okay, there's two questions there. So this is definitely going to be the last two questions that we'll answer today. Firstly, if the ideal time for you to practice is, and there's no one specific time because everyone's day is different. I still remember when I went to France, to Paris for a conference in 2009, I was quite shocked at how late everyone seemed to get up. Here in Australia, the world kind of wakes up and gets going around about 7 a.m. and we're all kind of we're getting up at 6 and we're up and going by sort of 8, 9. We're well at work by 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. In Paris, it felt like no one was awake until like 10, 11. So there is some, what I'm getting at is in different places of the world, what I'm about to say will be applied differently. But I find that the best time to practice for me is mid to late afternoon. So kind of dead center between my lunch and my dinner. So that means the contents of my stomach have emptied after lunch. So I'm talking, a couple of hours, about 3 hours after my main meal. So let's say I have lunch at 1 o'clock. Well, I'm talking about doing my vocal practice at around about 4 p.m. in the afternoon. The other thing too is I'm doing it at a time when my voice has naturally toned throughout the day, just through general vocal use. And so it has a sense of warmth, but it is not yet to the point where I'm tired and completely exhausted. So mid to late afternoon is optimal for me. That's not going to necessarily be the case for you. As I said, you're geographically, culturally, you might find there's a different balance in your day. But can I tell you, sometimes the best time to practice is when you can practice. Getting the practice done is often more important than when it gets done. And so, try, it's not as if, oh, I've missed 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Oh, well, I just won't do it now. Well, that's not going to help you at all. And there is, I think, something to be gained from doing your vocal practice at different times. So you get to experience your voice at different times throughout the day. Maybe practicing in the morning will give you a very different experience to if you practice at night, to if you practice in the middle of the afternoon. I would encourage you to experiment and explore those different things. Finally, to take care of your hoarse voice due to over-practice, rest, vocal rest, Nilima. You've got to give the voice a break. So many vocal health issues can be averted, and I'm talking about wear and tear on the voice, by simply giving it a rest. And I'm talking relative rest. I'm talking, if you really did overdo it, and I guess that's a point to be made, right? We're actually acknowledging that perhaps we've overdone things with our voice in a practice. So that's perhaps an error of judgment on our behalf. But then we have to respond with that. Perhaps that might necessitate that the next day we maybe don't do a vocal practice, because actually I spent all of my vocal budget today. Yeah, so vocal rest is so important. I always say, if your voice does not return to its optimal, usual, normal health within a couple of weeks, you do want to seek out medical advice and have your voice assessed by a laryngologist just to ensure everything's okay, because really, even if you overdo it in a particular vocal session, whether it be practice or performance, the voice should recover at the most within 48 hours. It can be longer if there are other extenuating circumstances. But if it's not recovered within 2 weeks, please go and see someone. It's really important. You don't want to stick your head in a bucket of sand and ignore what the voice is telling you through its own condition. Another great Q&A. I hope you enjoyed today's mini topic. Hit the thumbs up if you did, and go and practice. Go and get into workshopping your sense of connection. Remember, singing's not about perfect notes. Singing is about communication. And one of the spices of communication is emotion, and your ability to connect with your own sense of emotion and then convey that to your audience. Next week, we've got, as I said, a special guest, super special guest. I've wanted to have Heidi on the show for quite some time, and it's taken me a little bit of time to work up the courage to invite her on. And I was really surprised at how quickly and how she expressed eagerness to come on and share some of the stuff she's going to share with us next week. I was tickled pink. So if you want to see Daniel sort of fanboy a bit next week, don't miss next week's show. It's going to be great. I hope you have a great week. I'm Dr. Dan. Sing well.